how wide is the lake?
Well, the channel, they designed it.
So I think I'll start by thanking everybody for coming out. This is a true pleasure. My name is Kirk Klancke. I'm the president of the Colorado River Headwaters chapter of Trout Unlimited. That's our local group. We work with state Colorado Trout Unlimited and national Trout Unlimited. So we're a fairly sizable organization, but I love Trout Unlimited because it's a grassroots organization, so they give us a lot of freedom in what we do. So back in the day when Denver and Northern were coming to Grand County to take more water and writing environmental impact statements that said there won't be enough significant impacts to mitigate. They let us be pretty radical. It was really fun. We fought for 10 years with Denver and Northern, and then we came to a negotiated agreement. Negotiated agreement always means that they gave up more than they wanted to, and we didn't get as much as we wanted to, but we have a partnership now, and that's where Trout Unlimited stands these days. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. First I want to talk about Drought. Hey, there's still good seats in the back. Drought is the slow-moving disaster. It's every bit as devastating as a hurricane coming through and doing all its damage in 24 hours, but it's so subtle that it surprises you if you're not paying good attention. So, right about 2017, Trout Unlimited was looking at drought response plans, and the only one we really saw was Denver's, because nobody had one. So we went down to Denver in 2017 just to tell them that their drought response plan wasn't very responsive. We're in drought and they're watering 7 days a week. Grand County went with us. So we had a couple of Grand County representatives down there to say, what is going on here? The river's dying and you're watering 7 days a week. What came of that is they actually did rewrite their drought response plan to be more responsive, to take into consideration conditions in Grand County and Summit County where they get their water. So they have a better drought response plan. Don't know if it's any more responsive, but what really came out of that meeting was their comment. And what is Grand County doing with their drought response plan? How responsive is yours? And we're looking and going, we don't even have a drought response plan. So we went to the East Grand Water Quality Board. Trout Unlimited went and met with the East Grand Water Quality Board. The East Grand Water Quality Board is comprised of municipalities and water and sewer treaters from Granby to Winter Park. And we showed up with a template on what a drought response plan should have and look like, and we asked each one of those individuals on that board to write their own drought response plan and ask us for help if they needed it. And a year later, nothing happened with that, but the county is also on the East Grand Water Quality Board, and the county was sitting there. They heard this appeal and applied for a Sonoran grant to get the drought response moving forward. They got $10,000, they hired Anna Drexler-Dreiss, and they put her in charge of pulling all the stakeholders together. And that's as far as a Sonoran grant would take it, is pulling the stakeholders together. But they put in one room ranchers, golf course representatives, towns, water and sand districts, and environmental groups. Andy Miller was one of those attending those stakeholder meetings. And then at the same time these stakeholder meetings were taking place, we formed a committee to draft a drought response plan, so that each stakeholder meeting, and I think there were 8 of them, we came back with a more improved version based on their input. So by the time the stakeholder meetings were done, we had a draft drought response plan. As part of that draft drought response plan, we were also using this draft plan to practice figuring out what stage of drought we're in and what our reactions need to be as a community. Drought up here affects our ski area, our water supply for our towns, our environment, and our agriculture. It really behooves us to be paying good attention. A few years, no, about a year after we had a good draft plan and we practiced it for a year, we have a few stages. The first stage is called Drought Watch. We have drought indicators. Our first one in May, we sit down and we look at the snowpack, and that helps us figure out exactly what level of drought we start in. Now, something that we did that Denver doesn't do is we meet monthly or even every couple of weeks when things are changing rapidly, and we change what level of drought we can determine by our indicators. Our most important indicator would be the U.S. Drought Monitor, because it takes in soils moisture and precipitation, but we also look at precipitation and temperature, and we look at even forecasted precipitation and temperature to help maybe nudge us when we're on a line. So if I was going by my notes, I probably wouldn't say so much. And
Can I ask a question?
yeah, this is a conversation.
How much, how up to date are we on soil moisture?
Last year at this time, we had 50% on average soils precipitation. Our first meeting is just in a couple of weeks, and that's when I'll be given the report, so I can't answer that question right now. I'm anticipating to be slightly higher than average, but slightly higher than 50% of average. We might be 60%, it's pretty dry. I know that our snowpack is below average.
Yeah, well, I watch my snow as it melts, and I used to have mud season, and I had it for 3 days this time, and it's gone before it should even start happening. So the soil is just sucking up all the moisture, and there won't be as much in the streams and rivers, and that's such a critical thing.
Every bit of what you're saying is true, and which is why we're following it so closely, because the health of our rivers depends on how we react to drought. Now, here's something I know: the water diverters, Denver and Northern, take as much water in a dry drought year as they do in a wet year. So they own the water rights, they're exercising them legally. All we can do as locals is curb our habits, so we can maybe, and we ask this in the drought plan, we ask at certain levels, we ask agriculture voluntarily. Again, when you write a drought plan for the whole county, you've got all these fiefdoms. And so you can't have one plan with any teeth. It has to be an educational plan. We have to determine what drought is and tell people how you respond to it, and then it's up to each fiefdom to respond in the way that they see properly. When we wrote this plan, we had Denver's plan to go off of and Bozeman, Montana, and those were municipalities with total control. So we had to reinvent the wheel. We have a volunteer plan that hinges heavily on education. So about a year ago, we got another Sonoran grant to get our education up to speed. You'll see that this summer. We have templates now for each level of drought, and what that response is. There should be something coming out at least once a month about what we're doing. But if our golf courses cut back and have drier greens, if our ranchers, which are really afraid to cut back, even though the state engineer says you have to not use your water 10 years in a row. If you don't use a portion of it 1 year, we don't notice. We put gardens in with agriculture because this is a living document. Our first year we had gardens more in the bluegrass area where you just cut off all water to them at stage 3. And we moved it into agriculture, and last year we were in a severe drought, so I cut my garden back by 30% of the water I normally use. And it grew better than it ever had because it wasn't frosting at night. We were in such a drought this cycle that it was warm at night, and you just don't need as much water as you think. And by getting every one of these entities to go into water conservation, then that's more water we feel that'll end up in the river and maybe help make a difference in keeping a river alive. 1 CFS goes a long way. When your river's only flowing at 20 CFS, that's 6%. So that's how we're thinking on the drought response level. This year we have our first meeting just in a couple weeks, and now we have an educational committee, which was part of our plan. We formed a drought committee, which is represented by ranchers and golf courses and towns and environment and water and sand districts. That's who determines what the level of drought is, and the county scientist, because the counties are involved in this. And then the educational committee takes our decision and disseminates that into the public. So you should, I'm hoping, hear about it from more than just right here. This will be a helpful thing, because we've been in a cycle of 20 years now of drought, and sometimes 2 years ago we got into extreme drought. Last year we were just in severe drought. Tim?
Will you try and get that in the paper, or how will that be?
I think the paper's going to be one of the main focuses for the education committee, but I don't sit on that committee. So that's pretty much, I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed on what we're doing with that. You're in luck. Is there any more seats?
I think they're working on it, thank you. Oh, she's working.
Okay.
Can I just take that?
So now Grant County has a drought response plan. We're one of the only ones in the state. The rest of the counties in the state are actually looking at us and asking for consulting and advice on getting their own plans going. I think it's, yeah, Ingrid.
What more can we do? I mean, it's not like we have a million lawns. Is it mainly the ranchers who are going to first have to give up?
We do have a lot of lawns.
We do?
Yeah. How many acres of lawn are there in Winter Park Ranch? About 5 acres around Meadow Ridge. Anyway, Melinda's got that under control.
Oh, right, yeah. Is it Kentucky bluegrass?
But that's all you can buy, at least for a long time. There again, part of this education is getting people to convert to grasses that don't need as much moisture. Kentucky gets 38 inches of rain a year. Grant County fortunately gets a decent amount. It's the Front Range who's using most of our river that gets 12 inches a year.
There are towns in the Front Range who are, the government is helping people switch from lawns to xeriscaping by giving them
Towns all over the West have been doing that, and now there's a bill in legislation where the state's going to help fund that.
Yeah.
Denver Water was asked years ago to make that move, and I think when you're selling water by the gallon, it's not a very good financial proposition.
Yeah,
I'm not
and
sure.
that's your goal.
We've had a hard time convincing them to do, it's what is called cash for grass. It's old and it's effective, and someday we'll see it in Denver, but it'll mean that there's so much growth down there that they need it for future growth.
Kirk, remember when we tried to put in the Roundup program? Right.
Well, Denver wasn't very cooperative there
I
either,
know.
were they?
I'm trying to figure out when they have been, but that was another program, just like what we do here with our electric company, where we round up and try to provide heat to people that can't provide. I mean, that Roundup program, think how much money they would spend out to be able to, for mitigation.
That's what Trout Unlimited asked Denver Water, if they would do a roundup program, just where people round up, just like Mountain Parks Electric, to the nearest dollar, so you're getting 50 cents here and 35 cents there. They have 1.5 million customers. It would add up, and we wanted to put into the environments that they impact, which is South Platte, Blue River, and the Fraser River. It seemed to me it didn't cost them a penny. As a matter of fact, Trout Unlimited volunteered to come up with a startup cost that they guessed at $30,000. And then Summit County and Grand County and the group over on South Platte all volunteered to throw in the money that it would take, but it hasn't happened. So yeah, that's an example of not getting much cooperation.
Knowing but not acting.
So diminishing lawn watering, 60% of the water use in Denver is for residential lawns.
Did it go up?
That's the low-hanging fruit. Those are other things to work on. For drought, one thing I really like about Grand County having a drought response plan, when Denver's plan's not being responsive, we have leverage now. We can call them, because we do have weekly conversations since we signed that cooperative agreement. So we can have real frank discussions with upper management about our drought response plan has your water supply in severe drought or extreme drought, and you're not even in drought watch yet, which drought watch is just the basic recommendations, kind of what you should always be doing. Water 3 days a week instead of 7. Anyway, we have leverage because we have a drought response plan now. So you're right, we won't make a huge difference, but I think the political leverage it gives us to be in certain levels of drought and have the science backing our statements will give us a lot more power when we talk to Denver and ask them why their drought response plan is not very responsive. So, is there any other questions on drought? Because I really am excited to get into updating you on the connectivity channel. This is probably the single most important project in the watershed for healing the headwaters of the Colorado River. It's connecting a river that had a dam put right in the middle of it. And the destruction of that is just incredible.
One quick question, what data do you try to gather to supply them on the drought issue?
Oh, well, you mean what our indicators are
Yeah, what,
for drought?
yeah,
Okay, you go to my cheat sheet. First we start with snowpack and we use that for April and May. Then it's no good anymore. US Drought Monitor is one of our most important indicators because of all the, it's just such good science-based information. That's our #1 indicator. We also look at precipitation and evapotranspiration studies of the area so we know how dry it is, pretty much. Another thing we look at is soil moisture. It's called a quick dry. The government puts it out, but it's satellite images, and we see it for the whole county, which is interesting too. We're a Grand County drought response plan, so we have the west end in extreme drought and the east end in severe drought, and then we just have to figure percentages so we know whether we're in stage 1 or stage 2. And then the final one is predictions, which we rely very little on, because the further out you go, the less predictable anything is. So the predictions we look at, but we take it with a grain of salt. We're thinking about adding a vegetation survey. Again, the satellite take images and can tell you the health of the vegetation, how dry your forest is. So that's one that we'll see added this spring in our meeting in a couple of weeks. And then, yeah, Jay.
Quick question, water quality,
Yeah.
what are we monitoring in that area?
In Grand County?
In Grand County?
Wow, $600,000 worth a year of river water quality monitoring.
Okay.
Temperatures, extensive. The reason it's 600,000 is there's a lot of redundancy. The state does it, and the Learning by Doing group does it, and Denver Water's doing some, to report to the state, Northern Water's doing some. So there's a lot of redundancy, but the Grand County Water Information Network was formed to try and wade through all these bureaucracies and cut down on that redundancy. But it's still around 600,000 a year. But Learning by Doing, I can speak directly at. Temperature's big, sediment transport's huge. Of course, we track stream flows, CPW's doing fish counts. Learning by Doing is doing macroinvertebrate counts. I like those better than fish counts. I think the bugs are the real indicator species. If you lose them, you've lost the fish. So those are really the biggies that we hit, but we're also doing dissolved oxygen and pH, and the list is extensive, and I think we're doing a good job of the stream monitoring. I really do. We spend an awful lot of money on it, including our small Headwaters chapter of Trout Unlimited. I bet a third of our budget might be for stream monitoring, because we believe in it so much. We pay for one real-time stream temperature site that is used by the River Museum to educate people on water temperature. And it shows you what happens to the fish at certain temperatures, and then it shows you exactly what the temperature of the river is right at County Road 83, is where we put that site in. That's almost $2,000 a year we have to spend just to have one real-time gauge. But yeah, that's working with the USGS.
What percent of what Denver is entitled legally to take do they actually work?
That's an excellent question. He wants to know how much of the river Denver's taking and how much do they own. They're taking about 60%, round numbers. Right now, they own 90%. Part of the negotiated agreement was to have them sign a contract saying they'll never exercise all 90% because it'd be the death of the river. So when we design our stream channeling projects, we design them to be healthy at the flows that Denver's going to allow us to keep. So there's quite a concession. The people who wouldn't give us money have given up yield, which costs them money. So we, like I say, negotiations, you don't get everything you're looking for, but we were pretty firm on that, and we were firm on flushing flows, because they're gonna mostly divert in the spring. So if we don't get, they have to give up yield in the spring if we haven't had a good flush. Every third year we're gonna get a good flush. And part of that is they might be able to keep their yield by flushing Ranch Creek one year and then St. Louis Creek the next, and take from the other streams and just rotate their diversions. They've also set the boundaries. They used to sell to everybody who asked them. They would, every suburb outside of Denver they'd sell to, they no longer will sell to suburbs outside of Denver. So they're restricted in several ways by this agreement that we came up with. Something far more valuable than money, I think, is some of those negotiated points that put water in the river. So I guess I'll move on to the Windy Gap Connectivity Channel.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Although it's a small percentage, Ingrid mentioned the grass lawns in Denver, is there any way that they could pass ordinances to prevent that for future development? And even up here in Grand County?
Here's one of my lowest points in all the time I've been doing this. When Bill Owens was governor, the House and the Senate passed a bill that restricted developments from requiring bluegrass. And it got passed through the House, through all the committees, through the House, through the Senate. Owens vetoed it. It's like, what kind of future is that for the state of Colorado? What happens up here is as important to Colorado as what happens down in Denver. They have to look after the health of our rivers if they're going to have a state that people want to come to. And part of the reason I think we had some success in negotiating with Denver Water was they don't want to be the business that kills a river. I was even told that by one of their marketing people, that now Denver residents are calling and telling them they've got it, they can't kill the Fraser River. So their customers, their end user, is this fight. And I've always said, it's not the people in this county that are going to save our rivers. It's those people on that side of the divide. And Denver Water's a little afraid of the negative publicity, and I think that gave us about the only leverage we had, because we didn't own any water. Still don't. So, yeah.
Just a quick question. You mentioned 90 and 60 for Denver Water own versus what it takes.
Oh, yeah.
What about Northern? Yeah,
Um,
what's the statistic for Northern?
Okay, Northern's right around 60% through the Colorado Big Thompson project. And with Windy Gap firming, that percentage will go up a little, and I can't tell you what that percentage is, because Windy Gap can only pump in the spring when there's free river. It's really not a reliable source of water. In dry years, they can't pump. In wet years, when Granby filled, they never could pump, which really hurt them. So now they want to build Chimney Hollow, so now in wet years, they can pump and get some yield. It'll increase their yield, but as far as increasing the percentage of the river, it won't be a whole lot. And then they're held by other restrictions. These agreements that we've worked out with them that make them partners. Last June, on June 4th, Colorado Parks and Wildlife shut the Colorado River below Kremling down for fishing. So all the fishing guides were unemployed. On June 5th, after the Learning by Doing group got hold of Northern in Denver and had an emergency meeting, Northern shut off one of their pumps. And Denver, who was taking 500 CFS through the Moffett Tunnel, started taking 400. And the stream temperatures down below Kremling dropped, and the guys went back to work. So some of the agreements tie their hands in what percentages they can take too.
Kirk, the Gross Reservoir and the expansion of that reservoir that's been approved, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Is that gonna help the Fraser at all in terms of having more storage for Denver and therefore maybe less call on the river?
That's a great question. That's an excellent question. Here's one way it can help. They're going to have a lot more water in storage, and that gives them more flexibility. Last year in August, I had a little hissy fit with Denver Water because the stream temperatures in Ranch Creek were going so high and high enough to kill trout. And the first time I told them they needed to make releases, I got that. We don't have the flexibility. And the second time I told them that, I told them more firmly. I just said, well, why are we meeting if we're going to look at charts and decide there's nothing we can do about it? Let's think outside the box. Denver has to release 65 CFS from Willens Fork Reservoir to meet downstream water rights. Release 5 of it from up here in Ranch Creek. And sure enough, the next day, they released 5, temperatures in Ranch Creek came down and they never went back up. So when they have that reservoir, that flexibility excuse won't be, I won't have to get as irritated.
Why don't they ever have enough excess to fill that reservoir?
There's a good question. It's going to take some wet years, and we're in a 20-year drought cycle now. I'm not sure. They're the ones with the multi-million dollars in investment, so I hope they've done their due diligence. I don't know. That's a great question. I do know that negotiating for those flushing flows was critical, because when they fill that reservoir, they're still going to have to make sure that our streams are kept whole and our sediment gets flushed clean. Then the other part on our shoulders is we have to keep the damn sediment from getting in the river in the first place. That's problematic. The last couple of years of development have been very hard on that river. When it's flowing at low flows, we dumped a lot of sediment into it. So yeah, there's something we need to do on both sides of the divide, and that's why I like the drought response plan. It shows that we're trying to do something. Getting our sediment under control would be great. Our towns are exempt from doing stormwater. It would be really nice if they did it anyway on the grounds at their Headwaters communities. There's an interesting concept. I think there's plenty of grants out there. There's all this infrastructure money floating around. It'd be wonderful to see. And developers who use erosion control devices. I think that the laws are in place, it's just that the enforcement's not. So anyway, yeah, we got some work to do on our part too. Our ranchers allow their cattle to walk through the stream and flash graze the riparian. A lot of education to do.
Exclosures.
What is?
Exclosures is what the ranchers need to put on their streams. Keep the rut.
I mean fences?
Yeah.
Keep the cattle out?
Yeah.
That's what I call them.
Yeah, well. Yeah. If they're not fenced in, they're fenced out.
Right. So it's an yeah, I get the term now. Just did I?
And then the beaver
I
can
mention I was
do
a
better.
stonemason?
And then the beaver can do better.
Yeah, you know they're good for the ecosystem. So let's talk about Windy Gap. Oh. Samantha.
Shake the mouse.
Yeah, reboot. That's all I know.
Good.
Hey, your little handheld map's going to be better, but I'm going to go through this and you're going to imagine what I'm seeing. So you see right here at this bend, this is the Colorado River coming down from Lake Green. Right here at this bend, this is the Fraser River coming out of the Fraser Valley. This plan, well, before I get into the plan, let me outline the entire reservoir is this big now. Right now it's like this, and the dam is here. In 1984, the original stream bed would cross the highway and then go like this, right through the dam here, it flowed this way. They put a dam right in the middle of a river. Back in 1984, I think I was drinking beer and playing softball. We weren't paying much attention. I'm sure they had an environmental impact statement that said there will be no significant impacts.
I wrote an editorial against the dam, Kirk.
You did, good job.
Mark Manifest. Mark William for a cottonwood drill is what he was trying
And
to.
how did that work?
Yeah, very well. We gave it a try.
Yeah.
Some of us are
I'm glad-
here and paying attention.
Yeah, well, here's how right you were, Andy. This dam, first of all, through the main stem, stopped all fish passage. What fish want to do in the spring, the rainbows, and in the fall, the browns and the brookies, they want to come upstream all the way up into the Fraser Valley. They no longer could do that. So in 1984, this river got cut in half. This was a terrible project, permitted by the federal government. A little hard to take that permit back, so we're trying to work with a mess that was created mostly by the feds not listening to Andy in his article. So, a little history on this subject. This dam went in 1984. And nowadays, if you want to put a dam in and get a permit for one, the river would still run here and the dam would be over here and you'd be filling an off-channel reservoir. Essentially what this project is intended to do is turn this dam into an off-channel reservoir again. This will be the new channel and we'll have fish passage. Not just fish passage, gravels move down through the stream and create a healthy stream down below. The stream down below here hasn't seen gravels refresh the geomorphology in 35 years. That means that macroinvertebrates have been covered up and the sculpin have disappeared. I don't want to steal my thunder though, so let me follow my notes. So in about 1990, somewhere in the 90s, the landowners below this dam were fly fishermen, and they noticed that there was a tremendous crash in the population of the giant stonefly, which was the main food that made the fish big. So the fish are getting smaller and the giant stonefly are getting less plentiful. So they formed a group. The landowners formed a group called the Upper Colorado River Association. And they went to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and formed a partnership. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife studied this section of river in the 90s, compared it to historic data, and then came up with the Barry Nearing study somewhere around 2004-ish. Barry Nearing was a CPW fisheries biologist. He did a wonderful job of pinning down exactly what happened here when this dam went in. When the gravels quit moving, and this is a very shallow eutrophic type lake, so winds stir the sediment, gets in the water, goes over the dam, fills in the river for miles below the dam, fills in all those interstitial spaces that the bugs live in, and that's why the giant stonefly disappeared. 38% of all the macroinvertebrate species disappeared, and 100% of the sculpin, 100% of the giant stonefly. These are the large, sculpin are big, giant stonefly. This is what it takes to grow healthy fish, and now it's gone. So we're missing that aquatic habitat, and the riparian habitat started degrading too. So now we've got a lesser riparian and a really damaged aquatic. We lost the bugs. The fish is still enough to be a gold medal fishery, but I claim that's a very low bar. That's like 65 pounds of biomass of fish every surface acre of water, with something like only a dozen have to be over 14 inches. There's some severe aquatic damage caused by this dam. So this Upper Colorado River Association, little digressing, these guys started in the 90s. Originally it was the president of Colorado Trout Unlimited, Tony Kay. It was Bud Isaac, who died the night of our environmental assessment hearing. And it was George Beardsley, who died of cancer much earlier. So when you get involved in projects like this, you may not live to see them done. Lurleen Underbrink Curran's also very actively involved in this. She's no longer alive, so I'm just saying, I hope they build it soon. I'm getting nervous. Let me see. About 2002, we were given a little foot in the door because the municipalities who own water in this dam, Loveland, Erie, Longmont, Boulder, North Broomfield, they wanted to increase the amount of water they could take from here by building a dam on the east side of the divide so they could pump water when Granby was full. We had 3 years in a row recently where Granby spilled and they couldn't use this dam at all. So they wanted to be able to take more of their legal water rights. So they came up with this theory of they had the pump capacity here, the pumps, plenty of pumping capacity, no place to store it. So they want to build Chimney Hollow, have a place to store it. They write an environmental impact statement. Surprise the hell out of me. No significant impacts. So we took exception to that. We being Trout Unlimited, Trout Unlimited sent us a national Trout Unlimited attorney whose main focus was just this. So we've had her since 2006, and Graham County took exception. They spent $1 million on a stream study, a stream management study, just to see what the existing condition of our rivers are and what solutions need to be put into fixing our rivers. They also hired $1 million worth of environmental attorneys who work with the National Trout Unlimited attorney to negotiate with these guys on the grounds that we always had a backup plan, would take them to court. But we never got to court because, for one, we spent so much money on science that we could show the EPA, who regulated the permit process, just how wrong their information was. There were more than significant impacts. And they didn't want to get into that battle and those delays. So they came to us with some negotiated offers. It was interesting when we started this, they claimed that there still were no significant impacts below the dam. So in this, they, in the negotiated agreement, they agreed to spend about $6 million on the river below the dam that's been destroyed. That'll be done through stream channeling and geomorphology. What happens when you diminish flows is the 40% left that's in the Colorado River spreads into the native stream bed. So it's very wide, very shallow, it loses its velocity, can't move sediment, and it's built like a solar collector. So some of the work that's going to get done is going to be doing some channeling work, creating some habitat that'll be healthy with the flows we know to get. The flows we get are regulated by the federal government. This is part of Senate Document 80, which was revised in 1961 to even lower the flows. But we know we'll always have these flows. The question of whether or not there'll be flows in that channel, there will always be flows in that channel, because Senate Document 80 says there'll be flows. Hey, IT, thank you.
I'm a little late, but I'm here.
Wow, yeah. So we know what these flows will be. This channel will be designed by hydrologists and fisheries biologists, and it'll be designed to maximize the health of the aquatic habitat with the flows that we know Senate Document 80 guarantees us. So all we're doing is those flows, same flows used to go through this dam, and this is a eutrophic dam. It did the same thing the Colorado River that Shadow Mountain Lake's doing to Grand Lake. So we're eliminating the influence of this lake by building a berm here, turning this 1/3 that used to be reservoir is now land, and then we put a channel through this land. We plant a mile of riparian zone through here to replace all the riparian that died underwater here. So we'll gain a mile of new riparian. We'll also gain a mile of new public fishing, because after that riparian's established, 2 years after this project's done, it'll be open to the public for fishing. This section used to belong to the Schmucks. Northern bought it. The Schmucks want 10 years of fishing rights on this little section. But the rest of it will go public in 2 years, and in 10 years, this little piece will be public also. So what happens when you reconnect a river like that? First of all, up here on the Fraser River, use your imagination, actually it shows on your map, there's giant stonefly, there's sculpin, there's a healthy ecosystem up here on the Fraser. Now that healthy ecosystem can get downstream, which is the general direction that the bugs go. They get pretty much swept downstream, and they can repopulate this. We'll also be doing our stream channeling work, making it a healthier bug population and a healthier habitat for when these bugs repopulate to come down. We expect to see giant stonefly below this dam again. We'll see sculpin below the dam. We'll see fish in the spring getting all the way up into the headwaters of the Fraser River, and all the way up to Lake Granby, unfortunately. Now, to get up the Fraser, there were 2 other fish barriers. One was the water intake for the town of Granby. I don't know if anyone noticed, but right off the highway, there was a 6-foot wall of water that created a dam where they took their water. Now it's a big long riffle. It comes to the same height. They never lost water, but now we have fish passage. And then there's a gauge that Northern owns right in here. we have to build a fish passage around it. But part of this project is to build the fish passage. Right here, this is a diversion point that will allow Northern then to put water when they're pumping into the reservoir, and they will be legally obligated to always bypass enough water to meet Senate Document 80's requirements. So this is the plan to reconnect the river. Several were studied, including removing the dam. It was one of the alternatives. It got thrown out because it's a federally permitted dam, and this is a $27 million project to remove that and protect the river. This reservoir is filled with eutrophic soils. The whirling disease, tubiflex worm, thrives in there. If you just took that dam down, all that would flush downstream. Phosphorus is cumulative. This has 35 years of accumulating phosphorus. There's nutrients in there that would just turn the river for the next 7 miles into weeds. So there's reasons that didn't get chosen as an alternative, that this was. I think it was less money, and all these eutrophic lake soils can just stay right where they are.
What about the new exposed land? Is that gonna be as bad?
That's the riparian I'm talking about, being reestablished.
I know, but if it's in such poor shape, is it gonna heal?
This is all fill. That poor soils, they're gonna put like 5 feet of fill over this whole area. The fill's coming from across Highway 40 in 2 different sites, and it's all clays. So it'll bury the eutrophic soils, and they'll never have a chance to surface.
Will any water spill over the dam then when this is done?
There's 2 ways for water to get through this dam. One's over here and one's through a bypass channel. This bypass channel, if they're pumping and there's still more water in the dam because they have to leave the dam at a certain height, besides getting smaller, this dam's also getting taller. But I think under rare circumstances, because they can control it here, there shouldn't be much reason there to spill over the top anymore.
But they will raise it then, part of that project is to raise it?
Yeah, part of it's probably, because then they need a deeper lake. That's part of the problem with this lake and they're not raising it by that much, probably just a foot, but it will help to cut the size down and to make it deeper. It's gonna help tremendously. And then at their expense, they have to dredge this regularly and pull those soils out and haul them off. It's expensive, it's not the best design.
Could you tell me what eutrophic
Oh,
means?
okay, lakes have several stages. And their last stage in life is when they filled in with sediment. And they're very old and they turn in more like swamps than lakes. That's the last stage of a lake's life before it dries up and goes away or whatever it does. But yes, lakes with heavily laden with sediment and weed growth, and I'm sure you've seen those before, where the lily pads just take over the whole lake because it's shallow and heats up. That's another problem here. A big solar collector surface dumping water down in the Colorado River. This is going to keep that water moving through fast. Not going to have a chance to heat up. Temperatures down below on the Colorado should see some serious help.
What's the timing of this, Kirk?
This is the interesting question. Right now it's an environmental assessment process. If the environmental assessment process, which reported to Grand County that all the effects from doing this project are long-term positive with a few short-term negatives, mostly because of construction, noise, and dust. So the environmental assessment is very pro this project, as is the main funder, the National Resource NRCS, National Resource Conservation something. I used to know. Anyway, they're the main funder. Let me tell you some other funders. This is kind of fun. And some of my information could be a little antiquated because I Northern was obligated by agreement to put in $2 million, now they're putting in 4 because every time an engineer touches the design, price goes up. So they've doubled their commitment, plus they paid for the, before we even proceeded, we had to do a feasibility study to see if this would even help the river. And that was $500,000 that they paid for up front. And now that they've seen the study, now they're 100% behind the project. So they doubled the amount they're putting in. Denver Water's putting in $1 million. Grant County's putting in $1 million through the Open Lands, Rivers and Trail Fund. Colorado Water Conservation Board, the state's put in $2.5 million. The private landowners who first brought attention to these problems downstream put in $260,000. Probably costs more to buy a hut, doesn't it? I don't know. Anyway, and then just recently Pepsi Company has agreed to put in $2 million. They do bottled water. People like Denver and Northern and Pepsi like to have a positive image, and this project has such a positive response. That's why the NRCS is putting in, what do they commit, 5.7, almost 6 million, and if we're short, whatever shortage we have, they're guaranteed us this is the kind of projects that they invest in. We have the funding, is pretty much what they've told us.
Who is that?
National Resource Conservation Service. I think that they're part of the Fish and Wildlife. This is beyond my pay grade. Melly Whiting, our National Trout Unlimited attorney, got that grant. So she went to the feds and this project, and with the environmental assessment being so positive, we've gotten pretty much a strong verbal commitment that it's fully funded. Last year, we already did all the soils engineering and design work. Northern committed to that, whether we had all the funding or not. And that's why we could move forward this May, like next month, if there's no roadblocks put in the way. Yeah.
And the construction is,
And we'll finish it in 2023. So by 2025, this will be a healthy fishery, adding a mile of public fishing water, along with impacting the river upstream and downstream from this project in positive ways. That's all the environmental assessment found was positive things that this will accomplish. Yeah, Ingrid.
So if our drought continues and the waters continue to dwindle, would this channel have priority always?
Senate Document 80 gives it that priority, yes. Northern loses yield before this doesn't meet a minimum flow. And there's minimum flushing flows also. That was something that we negotiated, was the flushing flows. Senate Document 80 gave us the guaranteed flows.
Well, I can see one good advantage to the deeper, smaller reservoirs lost through evapotranspiration.
Correct.
Because
There's
they're
several
finding out
positives,
that it's like a foot or two that gets lost.
Right. Fortunately up here, it's so cold that the evaporative loss is seasonal. It's not like a Lake Powell where it's just hot year round. But we still have up to a foot of evaporative loss in Grand County at 9,000 feet in elevation. This is probably a little bit warmer.
Yeah, they're finding that riparian areas evapotranspirate less than reservoir surfaces.
And you might have covered this when we weren't here, but I was just wondering, it's a major migratory bird passageway. Was there discussion about like?
No, there wasn't. So thanks for bringing it up.
Oh, yeah.
That's one reason we're keeping 2/3 of the dam and getting rid of 1/3, is all of this is major bird migratory. The Audubon Society would come down on us hard if we got rid of the dam, that's for sure.
Interesting, yeah.
We'd have a fight. So I think this is a good compromise. The Front Range municipalities keep their water supply. The Audubon Society keeps its
So
refuge.
there's still some water in there.
And the river is reconnected. So of all the reconnecting of rivers that I've read about, it's always involved taking down a dam, but we're gonna connect a river. The plan is to connect a river without taking down a dam. So it seems to me a lot of people are winning with this solution.
What was the total cost?
$27 million.
A deal.
I think so, because we get the river healthy in perpetuity for that cost. And the price is only going up. So the project partners in this who will handle the grants and distribute the money and hire the contractors are Grant County Government, Northern Water, and Trout Unlimited. And then Northern Water will handle all the cash flow. So the buy-in's incredible, honest. It's incredible from where we started and the things I heard about how there was no obligation below. I think cultures are changing on the Front Range. I really do. I see that in Denver Water with their willingness to help. Both times that they released water last year, they were giving up yield, which means they're giving up money. And this wasn't the first time they've done it. 3 other times they've done it, once on the Fraser River and 2 on Ranch Creek. So when the Front Range people, water diverters who profit from every drop they take, are releasing water and giving up profit, we've gotten somewhere. Something's changed, and I'm not even gonna question why. I'm just elated to stand up here and say, it's better than it used to be. I've seen changes in the Fraser River. There's a sediment basin up at the base of Berthoud Pass, taking out thousands of tons of traction sand that used to just smother the stream bed for miles up there. There's the Fraser Flats project that used to be a slow, meandering stream through a flat meadow area that is now full width in the spring when it's carrying a lot of water, and now it shrinks into a narrower channel and it moves through there quickly, and macroinvertebrate habitats improved, and the biomass of fish is improved, and the stream temperatures are improving. So just below that Fraser Flats project, most macroinvertebrates on the Fraser River. And it didn't used to be that. Ken?
This is a little off topic, but the explosive growth going on at this end of the county
Yes,
brings water demands.
yes.
Water comes out of a well, doesn't come off right out of the
Tributary
stream,
wells, you're on the right track.
but certainly affects it, and the state engineer looks at them equally, as I understand.
True. Well,
groundwater
they are
services.
tributary wells.
Yeah.
The
So-
state water quality division looks at them the same way too. All the same testing for surface water supplies is done with water.
Yeah. So it seems it's easy to blame grass in Denver.
Well,
But-
that's a low-hanging fruit.
It is. But you know, we can look right here and see, like I said, explosive growth, consuming water,
Right.
right here, water that would be in the river right from the top. What responsibilities do we have in
You
that?
remember when I was whining about the people on this side damaging the river? Because I did go on. During development, there's been so much brown water dumped in the Fraser River while these things are getting built, plus the consumption of that water through what you're mentioning. We have a lot of responsibility. Our towns don't have stormwater control because they're exempt. You have to be over 10,000 people to be required to do stormwater control. Why are we dumping our dirt streets right into the river? Because we're a Headwaters community who cares if the state says you're exempt? We should be just taking that on. What happens here stays with the river all the way downstream. It really makes sense to me that we take stormwater control seriously, regulating developers and what soils migrate off their developments. We regulate them seriously. All of this is our responsibility as a Headwaters community. And then there's the water use, which is limited by water rights. And we'll see that, according to the Upper Colorado River study, coming into play in the town of Winter Park first. Fraser was lucky enough to have been given some great water rights by the O'Neill family, and they have enough water for all their projected growth for all but the driest of years. So, and I talked a lot about the drought response plan, because one other responsibility we have is to figure out how to use less water when we're seeing severe drought conditions. And that's what Grant County's written, that drought plan. And there's an educational committee who's going to bring to the community this summer what stages we're in and what we as individuals need to be doing. So all things we can do. Jay, is that good enough, Ken?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely different topic. With respect to risk management, so the engineering has largely been done. The first question was, who's the engineer, and has that been peer reviewed? That's different than
Above my pay grade, mister.
public review. And then the other
Yeah.
one is a more important question, I think, is the folks that you mentioned that are going to manage this contract likely have no experience in managing a contract for this kind of work. So will they have a construction
Let me
manager?
back up now. As far as
Okay.
peer review goes for engineers,
Yeah,
the Colorado River District has engineers,
Okay.
and they've reviewed it.
okay.
And Grant County has engineers, I don't know.
I'm thinking about I don't want to, at a different level, people who are really, have expertise in this kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, again, the form of the contract and the risk is really in construction and how that is managed. And
Right.
so,
Right.
are you guys just going to take that on, or? are you
Northern is
gonna-
going to take the brunt of that on. Just like the sediment basin at the base of Berthoud, Denver took the brunt of that on. They did the construction supervision, and CDOT's engineers reviewed it, and I had hired a engineer with the grant money I got to do the initial design, and CDOT had engineers and Denver had engineers. We put Denver in charge of construction because they tried in the contract, or the intergovernmental agreement, they put in a clause that said, we can shut this down at anytime we're not comfortable, it's done. And at the time, they had it was the old Denver, they had some really ornery employees. So we let them be in charge of construction because then they couldn't complain about how the construction was done. In this case, Northern paid for the study, Northern will oversee the construction, but the looking over their shoulder will be all the entities that are in the Learning by Doing group. That would be Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Colorado River District, and Middle Park Water Conservancy District has money in this and interest in this, so they'll be keeping an eye on it. They have engineers and hydraulics who have.
That's what concerns me, is so many people keeping an eye on it, whether there is one entity who really
Yeah,
does that.
so
We can have an
there's
offline
one entity
discussion
with-
about it. Yeah,
Yeah, there's one entity overseeing the construction, and the bidding process has already happened, and learning, all those entities I just named were part of picking the contractor. So a contractor's been picked,
go ahead.
and the oversight will be done then by Northern mostly, and I was really happy to have Denver do the oversight there, because they do things by the government book, where I'm a shoot from the hip all the way kind of guy. You don't want me in charge much. Ingrid?
Back to the water process, I had a conversation with our Commissioner Rich Cimino a while back, and I was worried about how much development we have going and how that might be lowering the water table and how we don't even know how much more water we have to give out and it's dwindling. And he said, well, it would be the ranchers who would have to give up their water first because ranching uses so much more water than
You'll have to tell me how that goes over.
Yeah, that's what I said to him. What are the ranchers gonna do about that?
No,
But then,
what limits it is the water rights that the town owns. And the Upper Colorado River study looked at the water rights that all the town owned, all the towns in Grant County own, and then they took their projected future growth and then charted out how those water rights can be met in a wet year, an average year, and a dry year. And the town of Winter Park was in the most amount of trouble, according to the Upper Colorado River study. That was done in 2002, and since then, I haven't seen the town slow down on annexations. But that's on their back. We have a state engineers department for a reason. Nobody uses more water rights than they're legally entitled to. And that will limit how much people on this side of the divide use, unless the town can continue to buy water, but when it's downstream, I don't see how they can use it upstream, so.
there's a corollary to this. I did hear, I don't know if it was Colorado River District or one of those overall river entities, I mean the whole river, saying that our growing season is so short and the growing season in the downstream states is longer, that water should be released from here, not used here, but go to the states that have longer growing seasons. It's in the forecast.
You want to talk logic? The Colorado Big Townsend project was built to grow crops on the front range that gets 12 inches of water a year. 100% of that water and the devastation of the Colorado River was so we could grow corn in a place corn has no business growing. It's not always logic, though, that dictates what happens. Now these people own the water rights, they own the land. These are personal property rights. This isn't Russia.
But it's not working anymore.
Well, it probably never did. It just wasn't noticeable. It's not one haying a year probably isn't the wisest use of our water, but it's a legal use of our water. So I think going there is just kind of beating your head against the wall. It's maybe we need to go a different direction. We're not going to take water from ranchers. They're going to sell it willingly, potentially, but that's how I see it. Yes, it's a foolish use of water to grow one hay crop a year at 9,000 feet. It's a foolish use of water to grow corn in a place that gets 12 inches of rain. We can send it all to California where they can grow year round, but it's not going to happen.
Okay, if you say so.
Gordon? Well, I'm not an attorney.
Would it ever happen to curb development from building so close to the river? We moved from New Jersey, and you can't build anything within 300 feet of a trout rearing stream. And up here it's like 50 feet. And I looked down.
30 feet.
What's that?
It's 30 feet. That's an excellent point, Gordon. This is terrible. What we've permitted and set into law, laws can change.
I know, and that's why I think this group, everybody here is interested. Maybe we could write our town fathers who are making these laws for us, have them make a law that they can't build more
For future development.
for future
If
development.
it's too late for existing.
I
I
understand
think
the
it's great.
existing.
Stormwater control, bigger riparian zones, these are all things that keep rivers alive.
Right, we can write letters and we can speak at the meetings.
Correct. That's true. Now, my excuse is I spent the last 20 years, the first 10 years of that, fighting with Denver Water, which was a full-time job. And then we write this agreement, we become partners, and now I'm busier partnering with them than I was when I was fighting them. I'd love to see somebody champion, and Trout Unlimited has it in their long-term planning to work on things like stormwater control with the towns. But yes, it's a great idea. If anyone wants to champion that one, you've got my full support. Because we need bigger riparian setbacks and we need stormwater control. Graham?
Yeah, my only comment at this point is we all should be damn thankful that we've got Kirk working for us, and he has been for the last 20 years. And his knowledge,
I've not been doing this alone. Thank you.
I understand.
So, someone have a hard question for me? Thank you very much.
Just a quick comment on it. I'm not a rancher, but the hayfields do return a lot of flow to the river and change the speed at which the water is moving downstream.
Excellent point. And when the water goes back to the river, because it goes back during low flow periods and they take it out during high flow periods.
Right.
Every bit of that's true.
So, you know, we have these reservoirs essentially all along the river. There are hayfields that are, and with global warming, I don't want to get into that, but as runoff's going to come off faster, that provides a bigger buffer that will provide in-stream flows later in the year. So,
You must be an engineer.
there is a benefit, right? So,
Branching is a benefit, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not all bad. Yeah.
Right.
I got a question on two other reservoirs, Shadow Mountain and Granby, Lake Granby. Are they scheduled to be dropped again this year? A rumor came up last week about Shadow Mountain being drained again.
Oh, let me see, for the weeds? Because they drain it sometimes for weeds. Granby's going way down because Horsetooth was dropped last year for maintenance, and now they need to fill it again. And we've got below average snowpack.
I think a lot of the sediment from the fires built up in Shadow.
Yes, and I can speak to how much that is, because I was given a presentation. The phosphorus levels in Shadow Mountain have gone through the roof. And in Willow Creek Reservoir, they're growing blue-green algae. You can probably let that go now, thanks, IT.
Yeah, the algae is terrible in Shadow Mountain.
Yes, I'm not sure, but maybe,
Big.
yeah, maybe they're gonna have to do something like that, but what I do know is in the Colorado River below Lake Granby, the phosphorus level is only up about 1/10 of 1%. The rivers, their water supply is our river's buffer, is how this is all playing out. So Willow Creek and Colorado River below Lake Granby, we're not seeing huge spikes, but in the reservoirs, 10 times higher than average. So, show of hands, who's going to be at the next town council meeting?
I got a question on phosphorus. You've mentioned that quite a few times. Is that coming from fertilizer, dog poop?
You know, it's naturally in the water. It comes from wastewater treatment plants also. It does come, a lot of nutrients come off of ranches, which is another reason to fence the cattle off. Help me out again, Ingrid, what was that called? Exclosures. If we can keep the cattle back far enough and have a healthy riparian zone, that filters those nutrients before they get in the river. Problem with nutrients in the river is they grow weeds. Weeds put an oxygen demand on the water, and that pulls more of the dissolved oxygen out of the water, as does temperature. That dissolved oxygen can escape when temperatures get warmer, when the stream temperature is warmer. Trout are a cold water fishery because they take more oxygen than any other fish. So they're not going to survive a lot of nutrients in the stream or a lot of warm temperatures. That's what we are mainly focusing on, is how to cool the temperatures. That's why Trout Unlimited plants thousands of willows. Every spring we go out and we plant, and I just heard about a new project CPW is doing. They're looking for willow harvesters on the 23rd of April, down by parcel, because we're planting more willows, it looks like, which I love. This is what the fisheries biologist for CPW tells me, is you can do the stream channeling, that's nice, and it's expensive, but the planting of the willows is every bit as important, because those fish the water needs shade and the fish need cover. So you want to create a healthy fishery, you just keep planting willows. So it looks pretty basic, but we're doing it, and it's fun, because the whole community shows up to do it.
Kirk, have you heard of the book, Let the Water Do the Work?
No. It sounds like a good idea.
I've been into it, but as far as willow planting goes, I just skimmed ahead and saw that you don't necessarily plant willows all along the stretch. You have to engineer for creating meanders. And so willows...
The meanders have dictated where we plant. We don't just go from one end to the other for a full mile. We really do, and a lot of what's driven it, though, isn't a good thought process like that. It's backcasting for anglers, because we're on private property. But it turns out, I'm sure, we're putting our willows on outside bends, because fishermen use the inside bend. I bet that book tells you to put them on the outside bends.
Yeah.
So maybe we're doing it right accidentally. Like I say, shoot from the hip, but and James Newberry used to say, we're just throwing shit against a wall to see what sticks. You have to try everything.
Yeah, but in an incised channel, they have to establish those meanders. Because it's so straight and all the water just runs straight through.
Right, well that's what our riverine project does. When we narrow a stream bed, we don't just dig an inner channel. We take point bars and we push the river this way, following the thalweg it normally wants to be in its normal course. We'll push it this way so that as the water recedes, instead of just going down like this, it's pushed into a narrow channel, and then the next point bar is further downstream. So now what used to be a straight channel has sinuosity. And this is what the Fraser Flats project's all about. This is the one we were going to tour, but we never have yet. We need to go look at the Fraser Flats project so you can see how that sinuosity is created. And when you look at it during low flows, you know that you're doing something good for the river, even if you're a stonemason.
And Pioneer Park in Hot Sulphur Springs has created new land meanders, a riparian area that you go in there, it starts raining on you like a rainforest.
Well, let's do more of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very successful.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of different types of work, which is why it takes a lot of eyes on what contractor gets hired and what work gets done. I'm glad to be working with Learning by Doing, because we represent educated people from both sides of the divide, big water interests in both the environment and in water development. It seems like a strong partnership. It's fun when you write grants, because you've got environmental organizations working with water diverters. It's pretty successful grant writing, but mainly it's their expertise. All this negotiating with Denver and Northern brings so much more than money. That expertise has to be worth more than what we would have got suing on.
Trout, thank you for being here.
And thank everybody for being here. Without